So you guys know me as a Panasonic fan. I've been really happy with their cameras. I've owned the S1H, the S1, even the S1R for a bit, the Panasonic GH5, GH4, and the G7, which started it all. Now, I really liked Panasonic from the beginning because of their video quality. It just really delivered something that no other camera on the market could at the time. Initially, I had the Canon T3i and Canon DSLRs, and when I finally experienced what Panasonic was delivering, I was blown away immediately and bought into Panasonic. About a year later, I went to GH4 just so I could have a little bit extra video capabilities and I didn't have to deal with some of the limitations that the G7 had. So I kept making those upgrades from the GH5 to the S1, eventually to the S1H, and I was super happy with that camera. That camera blew me away, and it still does. It has remarkable image quality, and it really taught me how to grow with the camera and use it to its maximum capabilities. So you might be thinking, okay, we get it. You like Panasonic cameras. So why would I ever make the switch from the S1H to another brand? The reason I didn't go with something like Canon, Blackmagic, or Sony is I felt like all those different camera companies were sacrificing in some regard. Look at Canon, for instance, for their EOS R. You would get some benefits like having autofocus, great lens selection, but you were sacrificing image quality, for instance, overheating eventually with the EOS R5. Sony was in a very similar position. You did get great things like autofocus, even a better lens selection in my opinion, but again, you were dealing with 8-bit, some weird video limitations. They were really focused more towards photography. And with Blackmagic, they pretty much did a 180. They had fantastic image quality, but you were still dealing with some of the compromises of that system. Poor battery life, no flip out screen. Basically, you were limited in some regards when it comes to being a versatile filmmaker if you need a camera that can adapt to different scenarios. Don't get me wrong, I think Blackmagic is tremendous when it comes to narrative, documentary filmmaking, and even music videos and whatnot, or things where you can really control the set and make it, look the best you can. Now, in more recent years, this line is beginning to get blurred. Basically, Blackmagic is becoming a little bit more versatile, not quite yet. Canon is starting to develop better image quality, but still has some quirks. But I think the camera company that is doing really well is Sony. Sony has made some really good improvements in terms of image quality. Now that we can shoot internal 10-bit colors, we offer a lot of flexibility in post. That way we can color correct our images to the way they want, or we want it to look. Same thing with S-Cinetone. They've added this into more of their mirrorless cameras, and it gives you pretty good colors looking out of the gate. And of course, if you want the maximum dynamic range, S-Log3 is a great profile to shoot in, and many people are familiar color grading and shooting S-Log. And the main advantage of Sony cameras right now is, of course, the autofocus. I know. It's been oversaid, but really, as I've gotten more and more used to shooting with having a good, reliable autofocus system, it has become invaluable. Think about it. If you put your camera on a gimbal, what are your other options? You either maintain the same distance or you're pulling focus somehow, whether that's remotely, having another person do it, or you're doing it. I basically don't have that luxury of another person pulling focus. So for me, being a solo shooter, autofocus is really nice. And for being a YouTuber, it is incredibly helpful as well. In my opinion, that makes a good camera. If the camera itself can get out of the way and allows you to achieve the shot quicker, faster, and easier, and is more forgiving, I think is a better camera, and I would rather shoot with a camera like that rather than having the perfect image quality, but dealing with some of those headaches. Now, no camera is perfect, and the A7S III does have its quirks. So here are some things I wish Sony would have done better, some things that I noticed when switching from Panasonic to Sony. So the main difference between the A7S III and the S series of cameras is first just from a body design. If you look at the S1, this is like military grade, it's big, it's bulky, which I like. Now on the A7S III, this is more of a mirrorless photography style camera. It's smaller, it's lighter, it still has a pretty good grip, They have made some improvements there from their previous generation of cameras. Next up is customization. How well can you customize your camera for your needs between each of these cameras? Well, I'll say they're pretty similar, probably just slightly worse on the A7S III. And that's mainly due to the S series programmable buttons right up front, which are really cool. The A7S III does not have any buttons up front, so you have less buttons overall. However, there are some menu things you can do to set up your camera. So overall, I think they're pretty similar. But if I had to get a winner, of course, it's the Panasonic. Let's talk about battery life. So on the S series, we have a really large and chunky battery. This thing lasts a pretty good time, and I feel really comfortable bringing 2 of these for the whole day. I know it's gonna last me. Now with the A7S III, they don't quite last as long as the Panasonic, so bring maybe 3 of them instead of 2. So I've done a number of tests on my channel to really see if there was a big difference in terms of image quality, because I knew going from the S1 and knowing how great the image quality is, I didn't really want to sacrifice too much image quality just for the convenience of, let's say, autofocus. So once I'd done some tests, really what it boils down to, they are slightly different, but in image quality alone, they're really similar, guys. Very similar across the board in terms of sharpness, in terms of dynamic range. You'll notice some differences in color, but really, I color grade a lot of my projects. And now that I have been using this color grade card a lot more, I've been learning how to kind of get the colors to where I want it. So using something like this, you can really dial in the colors and kind of correct some of those weird issues you may have had. Now let's talk about ProRes RAW. Is there a big difference, and is it worth it? So when it comes to something like ProRes RAW, you will need to invest in a recorder, an extra storage, and what main advantage do you get? Well, you get things like better highlight recovery, better exposure changes, white balance changes. As of now, ProRes RAW is not well implemented inside Premiere Pro. There's not a lot of things you can actually control just yet. Hopefully this changes in the future where we have more control, but for me, the internal codecs are perfectly fine for me. I have more flexibility than I really need to get the color grades and the color corrections that I want to do. In my kind of overexposure, underexposure recovery test, there is a difference, probably like a stop or 2, but that's about it. And I'm not over or underexposing by that much. I try to get it look good in camera, and if you do so the same, I don't think you'll see a big advantage of ProRes RAW. If you have a different opinion on ProRes RAW, I'd love to hear your feedback in the comments down below and get more informed of why you would want to shoot with ProRes RAW. So to summarize what we just talked about, basically the reason why I'm moving away from Panasonic to Sony is for number 1, the better versatility of the camera. I think the Sony A7S III is a better tool. Things like autofocus has been tremendously valuable for someone who does solo shooting and is a YouTuber. And I just think Panasonic is in a slightly weird spot where I can't really fully invest in Panasonic because their market is for documentaries and filmmakers. And if you're in that group, then great. You have a wonderful, amazing camera on your hands. And really, there's a lot of things I like about shooting with Panasonic. But again, it's not about the best image quality. It's about choosing the right tool for the job. That is my reasons why I sold my S1H and I'm moving towards Sony as of now. Keep this in mind for your camera recommendations. Be critical on how you choose gear and find the right tool for the job. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoy this, and I'll see you guys in the next one.